The sky above Istanbul was still dark, painted with the last whispers of night. Graceful boats slipped through the silver strait, past hills crowned with minarets and the intricate roofs of ancient mansions, as morning light shimmered like silk on the water. In the heart of Nishantasha, nestled between elegant shops and tall, modern glass buildings, stood the glass facade of Efe Atelier, a deceptively unassuming fashion house famous for turning fabric into art and models into stars. Leyla Kaya slipped through the side entrance, her breath forming clouds in the crisp morning air. She carried a worn, bulky canvas bag in her hand. Her coat, though pressed and clean, was outdated and thin, doing little to shield her from the chill. Her pretty shoes were worn at the soles, telling the story, if anyone cared to hear, of long walks and tighter budgets. Yet her face, clear, soft, and always calm, held no bitterness. She nodded at the janitor. "Günaydın, Ahmet amca." "Günaydın kızım," he replied, smiling as he held the door open for her. "Another early morning?" "As always," she replied with a small shrug and a smile. "There's work to do." Layla made her way through the empty corridors of the building. The glossy floors and pristine walls gleamed with opulence, their luxury in sharp contrast with her own simplicity. As always, she had to force down the feeling of being out of place. She climbed the stairs to the top floor, Efe Demirhan's floor. She brought him coffee every morning. It wasn't her duty. She was just a junior assistant, a glorified errand girl who filed reports and fetched documents. But after once hearing him complain about the taste of his coffee and priding herself on the success of her coffee experiments, she slipped into his empty office and poured the contents of her thermos flask into his, a brew of her latest success. He loved it, and she started bringing 2 thermos flasks from home. She told herself it was out of the goodness of her heart, but her heart told her she felt more than goodness towards him. She hardly ever saw him. By the time Efe Demirhan walked in, his tall frame clothed in tailored suits and his sharp eyes shielded by designer sunglasses, she was gone, swallowed back into the background of the building where she belonged. But still, she brewed the coffee, left his personal thermos on his desk, and arranged the files just so, a ritual of care that helped soothe her. Efe Demirhan arrived precisely at 8:45 a.m., as he did every day. He stepped into his office with practiced indifference, loosening the top button of his crisp shirt. The scent hit him first, warm, spicy, comforting. The coffee. He took a sip without thinking, his tense shoulders relaxing just slightly. Seelen Arslan, head of design and self-proclaimed queen of Efe Atelier, breezed in behind him. Her heels clicked like gunfire on the marble, her figure wrapped in couture silk. She placed a mock-friendly hand on his shoulder. "Good morning, Efe. The Monte Carlo investor called. He wants to meet Friday." Efe glanced at his watch and gave a curt nod. "Confirm. And don't change the lineup for the runway preview again. We're already locked." Selin smiled with a hint of frustration. Her red lips parted to say more, but he was already looking down at his screen. She stared at the cup in his hand. "I've been meaning to ask," she said, leaning in. "Who's been making your coffee lately? I can have my assistant take over." He didn't look up. Doesn't matter. But it did matter. It mattered more than he was willing to admit. The flavor was consistent, soothing. It reminded him of things long buried, of warmth, of someone giving without asking for anything in return. He had no idea who made it. Downstairs, Layla sat at her shared desk, typing up model schedules for Seelen. She could hear laughter and heels above, beautiful women orbiting the boss like butterflies. She kept her head down. Seelen swept past an hour later, dropping a folder on Layla's desk. "Correct these numbers, and next time, don't double-space the inventory sheet. It looks amateurish." "Yes, Seelen Hanim," Layla said respectfully, refusing to rise to the bait, not letting the comment sting. She couldn't afford to. Her mother's prescriptions had drained the last of her savings. Her paycheck barely covered their tiny flat and food. There was no room for pride, no time for vanity. But when she passed the CEO's door again and saw the open thermos, she smiled faintly. The week passed in its rhythm. Mornings were Layla's quiet offering. Files placed, desk arranged, coffee brewed. Evenings were for bus rides and pharmacy queues. Efe remained distant, aloof with everyone, unreachable. But Layla didn't need to be seen. It was enough to be near him, to witness the man behind the empire. One morning she arrived late. The metro had stalled, and her mother had needed extra care. She rushed into the building, hair slightly damp from the rain, her scarf askew. The receptionist raised an eyebrow at her tardiness. She walked upstairs quickly, but as casually as she could, trying not to call attention to herself with the thermos in her hand. She had managed to transfer its contents into Efe's thermos unseen and had her hand on his door to make her escape when it opened, and he stood there. He gave her a startled glance. Leyla froze, breathless, the thermos behind her back. For the first time, their eyes met. "Efe Bey! Sorry, sir. I'm late," she stammered with bated breath. He looked at her, instantly taking in her plain clothes, her anxious eyes. Something about her seemed familiar, but before he could speak, she slipped by him and walked away. That scene replayed itself in his mind several times during the course of the day until, spotting her just before closing, he pointed her out to his secretary. "Who is she?" he asked. The woman blinked. "You mean Leyla Kaya? She's one of the junior admin assistants. Works under Seelan?" "Admin?" he muttered, frowning. "How long has she been here?" "Just a few months. Should I call her?" "No. I ran into her early this morning. I just wondered who she is, that's all." The secretary's eyes lingered on Leyla long after Efe had gone away. Seelan had her under strict and paid instructions to inform her if Efe ever took interest in any woman. Her eyes glittered with anticipation at the thought of relaying her information. Seelan Arslan was growing more agitated by the day. She was no fool. She had kept her eye on Leyla and noticed the little fluster in her manner whenever she saw Efe, and she noticed Efe notice her. No, she would nip it in the bud. No affection would be allowed to grow between Efe and any woman. He was hers. He just didn't know it yet. Seelan stepped into Efe's office, portfolio in hand, and a smile that hovered somewhere between charming and coy. "I brought the updated shots from yesterday's session. Mila looks incredible, doesn't she?" She leaned slightly across his desk as she opened the folder, letting her perfume and presence linger. Efe glanced briefly at the images, then closed the folder with a firm hand. "She's too flamboyant for this pitch. We're going for understated elegance, not high drama." Seelan's smile faltered, but only for a breath. "But Mila is the moment. She has that spark, that international look. She'll own the room." She tilted her head, letting her hair fall softly over one shoulder. Lips curved in a playful pout. Efe didn't bite. His eyes remained on the file in front of him. The client asked for subtle sophistication. "We're using Lena." There was no warmth in his voice, just finality. Seelan blinked, then straightened, smoothing her blouse with a well-manicured hand. "Of course, I just thought she'd elevate the concept. Not this one." He didn't look up. The dismissal was polite but unmistakable. Seelan wasn't used to being told no, so when Efe dismissed her suggestion to feature Mila, her favorite model, in the upcoming campaign, she bristled. He had chosen a less flashy, more refined concept and handed the final presentation to marketing to prepare for the client meeting. But Seelan wasn't ready to let it go. But no matter, she would kill two birds with one stone. The night before the pitch, after most of the office had cleared out, Seelan crept back to Efe's desk, opened the folder Leyla had left for morning delivery, and swapped the chosen model's photos with Mila's. Just a few images. Enough to steer the narrative. At the meeting, everything was poised to impress. The client flipped through the portfolio until he paused. "This isn't the design we approved," he said, frowning. "Who's this?" Efe leaned in, his brow furrowed. "That's not right." He turned to Seelan and whispered, "Did you switch the model sheet?" She blinked in affected surprise. "No, of course not. I used Lena, just as you said." The client gave a tight smile. "We'll need to reevaluate. This changes things." After the fiasco of a meeting, Efe walked back to his office, his disappointment simmering beneath his usual calm. Seelan walked in behind him, her high heels clattering annoyingly. "Who changed the model? Who changed the concept?" "I swear I didn't change anything," she said, her voice indignant. "But I suspect I know who did." It was time to strike. "I saw Leyla working late last night," she said smoothly. "Maybe she made a last-minute change." "Tried to impress you?" Efe's gaze darkened. "Leyla? Are you sure?" Even as he asked, his mind flashed back to the image of meeting her, leaving his office, and looking anxious. How many times had she actually snuck into his office while he was out? He called his secretary in, his voice velvety, belying the anger he was feeling. "Write a letter of dismissal for that Leyla girl. I want her out immediately." "What reason should I give, sir?" the secretary asked. "Sabotage." "Yes, sir," the secretary said, turning to leave, but not before sharing a smirk with Selin. The news was all over the office even before Leyla received the letter. She went to Selin for an explanation, but received the cold shoulder. She knew very well that it was Selin who had changed the model, but she had no evidence. It was the normal thing in her society for underlings to take the fall for the mistakes of their superiors. She gathered her things as well as her dignity and left. The next morning, Efe was surprised to find his office cold, his desk in the disarray in which he had left it the day before, and his thermos empty. He called out to his secretary, who was surprised that he requested coffee. She had thought he always brought it with him, since she had not made him a cup in months. When she brought him a cup, he nearly spat it out. Too bitter and too hot. Just not right. For some reason he could not explain. He felt like he had lost something significant. It was more than the coffee. It was the welcome, the warmth, the love. "But that is ridiculous," he said to himself. The love? But he had to admit to himself that for months he had looked forward to that first step into his office, when the faint scent of coffee tinged with cinnamon first hit him. And then he had to admit further that somehow he had begun to associate that feeling with the face of Leyla, the girl he had bumped into leaving his office that fateful morning. But now he had fired her for sabotaging his work. In this industry, there were plenty of saboteurs, moles who were only too willing to sell one's idea to one's competitors. It was hard to prove intellectual property theft when ideas followed trends that were so easy to duplicate. He could not take the risk that the intern was a mole. But was she? He did not see it in her eyes. He spent the day distracted, checking files, reassessing the incident. Something didn't feel right. "Who replaced the intern?" he asked his secretary. "She wasn't replaced yet, sir." "What was her name again?" "Leyla Kaya." He typed it into the system. She'd only worked there a short while. No infractions. Stellar reviews. Always early. Why would someone like that risk everything? By noon, he requested footage from the hallway cameras. He watched as Leyla brought the folder to his office. Later, Selin passed by, alone. Doubt flickered in his chest. Still, pride wouldn't let him backtrack. Days passed. Selin tried to kindle Efe's interest in herself now that Leyla was gone. She had failed to move her favorite model's career forward, but she would try again next time. Meanwhile, she felt it was time to claim Efe's heart in case it wandered again. So she wore more revealing outfits and visited his office more often. And discovering that his favorite coffee was no longer available, she began to bring him some herself, but it always fell short, tasted flat, or was simply undrinkable. Nothing came even close to what he was used to. One night, at the end of a particularly difficult day, made even more difficult because he had had no comfort of a cup of bracing coffee, he stared at his thermos, still full, and sighed. "I miss my coffee. And I miss that Leyla girl," he groaned to himself, for the first time putting his feelings into words. He replayed the scene of their meeting in his office again in his mind. Why did I never notice her before? I know I saw her several times around the office, but I didn't notice her until that day, and now I can't seem to stop thinking about her. Weeks later, Efe attended a gala at Turan Palace, an event filled with celebrities, influencers, and Istanbul's elite. Models lined the red carpet. Waitstaff moved quietly through the crowd. He was deep in conversation with an agent when he saw her. Leyla. Hair pinned neatly, black serving uniform crisp. She carried a silver tray with flutes of champagne. Her eyes avoided his, but he saw from the way her body stiffened that she had seen him. She turned and walked away to reload her empty tray. He left his table and followed her into the corridor that led to the kitchen. "Leyla," he called softly. She stopped and turned. He approached, voice low. "You are here." His words trailed off. He had nothing to say. After a moment, she replied, "I work here part-time, Efe. I need the money." "I shouldn't have fired you," he said suddenly. The words pulled from a place beyond reason. He knew now, how he knew. He could not have explained even to himself, but he just knew that this girl, this simple, sincere girl, could never have meant him harm. And with that quiet certainty came a sudden warmth, the first flutter of tenderness, and the first feeling of something close to love. There was nothing to say to that, so she walked away. Back at his table, the agent leaned in. Is the great Efe Demirhan chasing after pretty girls? Efe smiled with practiced nonchalance. You know I'm always on the lookout for models. No, that girl would not make a good model. Her eyes are wrong, too deep and innocent. You are right, Efe said. Much too innocent. Weeks passed before they saw each other again. Then one afternoon, as sunlight spilled in through the windows of the busy restaurant where she had found work, Leyla felt his presence near her. She looked up just as a small group of executives entered, her heart stilled. There he was, Efe, tall, poised, unreadable in his sharp charcoal suit. He moved with quiet authority, listening as another man spoke beside him. Then he looked up. Their eyes met across the room. Her breath caught. A flush rose to her cheeks as her heart gave that familiar, traitorous flutter. Without a word, she turned back to her work, steadying her hands. Moments later, her manager approached. Kavaler, he said quietly. Coffee for the gentleman. She nodded. Turkish custom dictated that strong coffee be served to guests, especially to men of stature. It wasn't complimentary, but it was customary, especially in finer establishments like this one. The order had been placed without needing words. Leyla took her time, preparing the small tray with care. Traditional copper cups gleamed against the inlaid wood. Steam rose gently from the foam-crowned caves. The scent of roasted beans and cardamom curled through the air. She approached their table. Efe's back was to her. He was listening to someone speak. She bent herself gracefully and placed the tray on the low table before them. The soft clink of the cups made him turn his head, and then he smelled it. That coffee. That same rich, warm aroma, with a hint of cinnamon. The same blend he had received each morning, unasked for but always welcome, before everything fell apart. He looked up. Their eyes met again, closer this time. There was a question in his, quiet, stunned recognition, and in hers, an answer. Yes, it had been her. She had brought him the coffee all along. That morning, she hadn't meant to steal or deceive. She had only meant to deliver a small kindness, like every other morning. I'm late, she had said, breathless and flustered, and now he understood. He had fired the wrong person. Leyla wasn't sure when she started waiting for him. It might have been the third time he came in, pretending to need a private room for a quiet lunch, only to sit and savor the coffee, which he always insisted she be the one to brew. Or when he had brought in a stick of cinnamon, placing it at the edge of the table where she could see. Whatever the moment, it had already happened. She was waiting, and she hated herself for it. He was a man of impossible beauty and impossible privilege. But he kept returning, not as a titan of industry, but as a man trying to learn patience. He never crossed lines, never pushed her, just waited. One late evening, after the restaurant had closed and she was helping clear a wine inventory spreadsheet, she found a note slipped into her drawer. For the girl who makes the bitter taste sweet. I miss you. It was unsigned, but she had no doubts who it was from, and neither did her colleagues, who teased her about her conquest. The next day, he didn't come. Nor the day after. By the third day, she was restless, angry with herself, angry with him. And then he appeared, not at the restaurant, but outside her home, waiting as she walked home, her feet aching from standing all day. She stopped as she spied him leaning against his car parked just in front of her house, the neighborhood children gathering around it as they oohed and ahed. Then she walked forward quickly and went it, not inviting him in. She waited until he knocked before she opened to him. They stood in silence in the small living room, heads down, both feeling shy. For once, he didn't look like the intimidating mogul. He looked human. Why me? She asked finally. You're surrounded by perfect people. Models, designers, celebrities. I've had perfection my whole life, he said. It's never once made me feel at peace. Leyla looked away. And I make you feel peace? Yes, he said simply. Her mother's voice floated from the bedroom. Leyla? Is that you, Kazım? Yes, Anne, Leyla called back, smoothing her skirt and hurrying in. When she returned, she was supporting a frail woman, thin and pale, but still carrying the memory of youth in the arch of her brow and the delicate curve of her lips. Her eyes, once sharp, now shimmered with kindness. This is Efe, Leyla said gently. The woman gave him a weak but welcoming smile. Welcome to our home, Vladim. Please sit. Would you care for some vishna suyu? It's fresh. Leyla just made it this morning. Efe nodded politely. That would be lovely. Thank you. Leyla disappeared briefly to the kitchen. As her mother settled into a cushioned chair, she looked over at him with a light in her eyes. She talks about you, she whispered. Only good things. Leyla returned with a small tray. On it, 2 slender glasses filled with deep red Vishna suyu, cold and beaded with condensation. She set one before Efe with a quiet "Afiyet olsun," then passed the other to her mother. Anne, she murmured, cheeks warm, you don't need to say things like that. Her mother gave her a sly glance, then chuckled softly. Oh, hush! Let me have my fun. Leyla gave her a fond, exasperated look and took a seat beside her. But then her mother turned her attention back to Efe. Her laughter faded, not rudely, but with the quiet shift of someone who had seen much in life. Her eyes, though dulled by age, still held a piercing clarity. So, she said, setting her glass down with a soft clink, forgive me if I speak plainly. Why have you come here? Efe didn't flinch. He looked at her directly, his voice low but steady. To see your daughter. Her brow lifted. She works at the restaurant. You could see her there. I did, but I could not meet her there. I wanted an opportunity to be with her. A silence settled in the room like dust in sunbeams. Leyla stared at her hands. Her mother studied Efe for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. Well, at least you didn't come to play games, she said at last. My daughter's heart has always been easy to break and hard to earn. I hope you intend to take better care of it than you did at her last job. Efe's jaw tightened, but he nodded once, with sincerity. I do. Her mother leaned back into the cushions, picking up her glass again with a wry smile. Good. Then drink your juice, young man, and let's see where your good intentions lead. Leyla glanced between them, her face flushed, her heart full, and something like hope blooming gently in her chest. Selin found out through a mutual friend in the fashion circle. She came to the restaurant in a crimson dress that screamed power and revenge. But instead of venom, she approached Leyla at the hostess stand with surprising calm. I thought you should know, she said, setting down her glass. Efe never let anyone get close before. If he's choosing you, then I suppose I lost him before I ever had him. Leyla blinked. Why are you telling me this? Selin shrugged. Because he used to be mine to chase. Now I think he's yours to keep. She turned and walked out. A month later, Efe took Leyla to a vineyard outside of Istanbul. Just the two of them. A casual trip, he said, to taste wine and talk about life beyond the city. But beneath the casualness was intent. They sat under a canopy of grapevines, leaves fluttering in the breeze, sunlight dappling the table between them. Efe watched her as she gently swirled her glass. You've changed my mornings, he said. Leyla smiled faintly. Because you miss my coffee? No, because I wake up wanting to see you. She looked up. His eyes were steady, earnest. I used to think love was shallow. Pretty words and prettier people. But you challenge me, you comfort me, you make my world bigger. She reached for his hand. I was invisible for so long, Efe. It's strange being seen now. Then let me keep seeing you, every day. They didn't become lovers overnight. Leyla's boundaries were steel-framed and Efe respected them. He never demanded, never pressured, but he was consistent, letting love bloom gently at its own pace. That evening, when he dropped her off at her apartment under the fading light of a crisp autumn sky, he reached into the back seat and gave her a bouquet of red and purple tulips. Ask him, you're ridiculous, she whispered, moved. She opened the door into the tiny foyer and they called out a greeting to her mother. Then he dropped his voice. This house is so tiny, he said, having to squeeze himself against the wall so she would have room to take her shoes off. She looked up, amused. It's not exactly a palace, but it's mine. I know, but I want to take you somewhere bigger. Leyla tilted her head. What are you saying? He took a breath. Sevgilim, I want to take your mother's blessing to ask your hand in marriage. I want to wake up and see you across the kitchen, arguing with me about how much sugar goes in tea. I want you to decorate the corners of my home with ugly mugs and folded laundry. I want every morning to start with your silence and your strength. He reached into his pocket and produced a velvet box with a simple gold ring with a single solitaire diamond on it. Marry me, Leyla Kaya, and I will adorn your life with jewels for the rest of my life." Layla laughed through sudden tears. "I don't want jewels," asked him, "but if you truly wish it, then it is my desire as well." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her. Word traveled fast in the world of high fashion, moneyed elites, and the glittering halls of Istanbul's upper crust. But no whisper traveled faster than the rumor that Efe Demirhan, heir to the Demirhan group, was planning to marry beneath his class. The day his mother, Nalan Demirhan, heard it from her personal stylist, she nearly dropped her glass of pomegranate juice. "An intern?" she hissed, pacing her marble-floored salon. "A common girl who files papers and makes tea?" Her friend, seated nearby and bedecked in emeralds, gave her a knowing smile. "You'll have to act quickly, before it's too late." That very evening, Nalan made a call, a quiet one but powerful. Enter Zeynep Arslan. Zeynep was everything Nalan wished for in a daughter-in-law. Daughter of an esteemed judge, fluent in 5 languages, educated in Paris, and trained in seduction by life itself. She had modeled once, briefly, and for the right magazines. Her reputation was polished and pristine, but underneath was a hunger like wildfire. She had always wanted one thing, Efe Demirhan. When Nalan called, Zeynep knew her time had come. The first strike was subtle, a charity gala in Efe's honor, hosted, of course, by his mother. Zeynep arrived draped in a silk emerald gown that clung like second skin, her hair swept back to reveal high cheekbones and gleaming earrings. Her entrance turned heads. That was always the plan. When Efe arrived with Leyla on his arm, the contrast was intentional and stinging. Leyla wore a modest navy dress of Efe's choosing. She looked elegant, but unadorned next to the glittering women around her. As they entered the ballroom, Nalan swept toward them, wearing a green outfit that complemented Zeynep's. "My darling son," she said, air-kissing him. Then she turned to Leyla with a smile that never touched her eyes. "And you must be the intern." Leyla smiled politely. "No, Nalan Hanim, not anymore. I work at a restaurant." "How quaint." Then came Zeynep, smiling like a cat with cream. "Efe," she purred, gliding forward. "How long it's been." "Zeynep," he said, stiff. "I didn't know you were in town." "I came for you, of course," she said, placing a possessive hand on his arm. Leyla saw it. Efe gently removed her hand, but the damage had been done. Eyes were watching. Whispers floated in the air. That night, Leyla asked him plainly, "Do you still have feelings for her?" Efe looked at her, wounded. "No, never. My mother may have chosen her, but I choose you." She believed him. Zeynep didn't relent. The next week, she appeared at his office to discuss a collaboration. Her perfume lingered hours after she left, heavy and musky. She began to appear at the same parties, sitting beside him in photos, laughing too loudly at his jokes. She made sure the media noticed. Then came the final strike, a private dinner arranged by Nalan under the pretense of a business negotiation. Efe was led to believe his mother would be present, but when he arrived at the villa, only Zeynep greeted him at the door, dressed in satin and mystery, holding a crystal decanter of aged whiskey. "It's just us tonight," she said, lips curled. Efe stepped back. "I don't think so," she laughed. "One drink won't kill you, darling." He refused at first, but she poured anyway. He took a sip to be polite. That was his mistake. The drink was laced with something stronger than whiskey. Nothing dangerous, but disorienting. By the time he realized it, his vision was blurred and Zeynep was sitting too close, her hand creeping across his thigh. "You don't have to marry her, you know," she whispered. "You don't owe anything to some little orphan girl who doesn't belong in your world. We belong together, you and I, just like your mother always wanted." He drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of hands methodically stripping him of his clothes. First his jacket, then his shirt loosened, until unfamiliar fingers pressed against his chest. Summoning every ounce of strength, he shoved her away and staggered upright, the room tilting wildly. "You drugged me," he gasped. She smiled without shame. "Only to help you see reason." He shoved past her, out into the cool night, calling his driver through slurred words. Meanwhile, Leyla was at home, putting finishing touches to the next day's meal prep, while calling out a conversation with her mother, who sat in the living room offering instructions. Her phone rang, and she spoke to his driver. "He's not well. He's coming to you." She rushed downstairs just as the car pulled up. Efe stumbled out, disheveled and pale. She caught him before he fell, helping him up the stairs into her modest apartment. "Don't be mad," he mumbled. "I didn't touch her. I would never." She felt the blood drain from her face as the dark tendrils of doubt began to swirl in her heart. "What did you do?" she asked, beginning to back away. "Hush, Leyla Kazim," her mother said, pouring water into a glass for him. "Believe him. He came to you in this state. You are the one in his heart." Leyla hesitated for just a moment. Then she took the glass from her mother and fed it to Efe. Then she lay him down on the sofa, that was much too short for his tall frame, and let him sleep off the effects of the drug. In the morning, he explained it all. They planned it all. My mother and Zeynep, they wanted to ruin us. Leyla smiled gently, brushing the hair from his forehead. They didn't succeed. The fallout came fast. He moved out of his mother's penthouse and into an old townhouse closer to Layla's neighborhood. One day, he picked her up in the middle of the day and drove her, still in her uniform, to the marriage registry office. "But what about your mother?" she asked, a little panicked when she realized where they were. "I have your sweet mother's blessing, and that is enough for me. My mother be damned." Layla stared at him. "But what about if she pushes back?" He kissed her knuckles. "Let her push. Let them all push. As long as you're beside me, I'll never fall." Nalan sent a single message after weeks of silence. "If you must choose her, then I hope she is strong enough for what's coming." Layla read it and looked up at Efe. "I'm not afraid," she said. He smiled. "Neither am I." They stood at the balcony of their home, the Bosphorus glittering below them, its silver strait dotted with graceful sailboats and majestic yachts. They felt the wind blowing its cooling breeze around them, and their fingers intertwined. A year had passed since Layla and Efe had stood hand in hand against the world. The day they married was quiet and beautiful, far from the flashing cameras and high society critics. A quiet signing at the registry, followed by a simple gathering of a few close friends, a few flowers, and vows whispered with tears in their eyes. Efe, once jaded by beauty, had softened. The cold edge in his gaze had melted, replaced by warmth only Layla could summon. Every morning, he took his coffee from home, made by Layla's loving hands. Layla, with Efe's help, started a coffee shop that immediately became popular, helped as much by her husband's name as by her own talent. Their home was full of laughter and warmth. And that winter, as snow dusted the rooftops of Istanbul, Layla placed his hand on her belly with a smile. "We're not just two anymore," she whispered. Efe looked into her eyes, full of wonder. In a world that worshipped surface, they had found deep and lasting love. Epilogue. The sound of quiet footsteps echoed in the polished hallway as Efe and Leyla entered his mother's home. The air was thick with the scent of freshly brewed Turkish tea. Efe's mother sat calmly in the divan, her eyes measuring them both with a cautious hope. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice steady but softened by time. "I have asked you here because family is the heart of everything. My son is about to become a father, and I wish to be part of that blessing." The few near relations that were gathered murmured their assent. Layla glanced at Efe, sensing the unspoken tension. The old wounds had not healed easily, but the presence of the child growing between them offered a fragile bridge. "Your wife is welcome here," the mother continued. "It is time to put aside past grievances. I also want you to know Zeynep. She is no longer the daughter I hoped for my son. Her actions have brought shame, and I see now that my judgment was blind." Efe's jaw tightened. "Mother." "But this," she gestured toward Layla, "this is my family's future. Let us begin anew." Layla smiled softly, the promise of reconciliation blossoming in her heart as the old woman reached out to clasp her hand. The end.
Hi, please click on the subscribe button and maybe leave a comment. Thanks.